Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to continue our series on the best cards or the most played, most popular cards in Historic Brawl per rarity. So if you missed the Mythic Rare one, that's already up on the channel. What we're going to be looking at today is the most played rares, the best rares, the most popular rares, however you want to kind of look at it, and the corresponding stats to see, this card's being played a lot. Is it actually helping winning or not? And just want to preface, like I did with the other video, Historic Brawl is meant to be a fun format first and foremost. Ultimately, play whatever you want to play. But this is a way to kind of see, if you are a little bit tight on wild cards, what are cards that are played in a lot of decks. So you get kind of a stretched opportunity. There's going to be, for example, certain commanders that require very niche cards that only work in that one archetype. Whereas there's going to be other cards that have a lot more utility across a variety. But ultimately, play what you want, play what you enjoy, and have fun first and foremost with the format. So we're looking at Untapped GG. It's a companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client. So it's got a whole bunch of cool tracking data like win rate, stuff like that. You can get started with it. Link is in the video description. But we are going to be looking at it from what their card statistics for Historic Brawl. So from November 15th to December 11th, which is about a month worth of data, they've had 370,000 matches of Historic Brawl played, and we're kind of filtering based on 1,000 games played minimum. And we'll kind of walk through. So with the rares, there's going to be a lot of lands, so we're going to kind of skim over them. Rare lands are good. Dual lands are good. Play dual lands if you have them for your colors. Stuff like the shock lands. The slow lands, any of those have a lot of utility, especially like stuff like Channel Land, and we'll kind of get into that. But unlike Mythic, where there's fewer lands, we're going to kind of go over the lands and kind of skim through them a little bit faster. And then just one other stat before we jump in, we're going to explain. So there's the included win rate stat. So let's look at example Fabled Passage as the first card. The most played is in 170,000 decks. So almost half of the decks have Fabled Passage. So included win rate means this card is included in the deck and the deck won. Doesn't mean you drew the card, doesn't mean you played the card. It's just that this card is featured in the deck and you won. Kept win rate is if you kept this in your opening hand and it's kept 79% of the time, what is your win rate? And then available win rate is if you actually played it, what is the win rate of it? So you'll see that kind of differ. You can keep a card, maybe card's 10 mana. You can keep it, but if you don't play it, then that kind of sways the overall win rate. But if you play it, it could have a big swing in terms of the effectiveness. So we're going to kind of go through. So Fabled Passage, most played card. We have Otawara, and we're going to see this. All the channel lines have a lot of utility in this format. Beseju, Ejanjo, everything like that. A lot of words that I can't pronounce well. But these are really good crafts. The nice thing is even you only need one for constructed play usually anyways. So they're nice inclusions here. The biggest thing with these rare lands and stuff like that is you're playing 40 land formats often. Having utility in your lands, mana sinks, spell lands, stuff like that have a lot of ways to help you if you are flooding and kind of reduce the variance, especially in a singleton format. The most played non-land card is Swords to Plowshare from the Mystical Archives. Just a premier removal spell for 1 mana. Exiling is very useful in this format where there's a lot of graveyard interactions, stuff like that. The life gain is usually not that impactful as you're usually going to win by big swings here or there. And we're seeing this like 53% overall win rate in the deck, but when it gets cast, 61%. We have Beseju, the Channel Land. Key to the Archive is one of the alchemy cards, and it's got a lot of utility in here. So at the base level, it's a 4 mana, add 2 colors, 4 mana artifact that then lets you add 2 mana colors. So it does fixing, it does ramp included in that. From there as well, it also lets you draft from a spell book that has a lot of powerful cards. Stuff like Time Warp is in there, Wrath of God, removal options. So it's got a lot of utility in that way there. Tutors, everything like that. And it also lets you discard. So if you are playing like a Reanimator shell, stuff that cares about the graveyard, it also lets you put cards into your graveyard as well. And we're seeing this 54% overall win rate, almost 60% if it's actually played. We have the Shockland cycle. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Shocklands are the lands that require you to pay 2 life for them to enter the battlefield and tap, and they have both basic land types, Forest and Island. So if you're playing like the Check lands or the Buddy lands, anything that requires like that type, it also helps there. So just kind of like the premier dual colored land. Then we see the Celestis. So we're seeing elements of mana accelerant. Hitting your mana, curving out has a lot of utility. In terms of the 3 mana rocks, this one's got a lot of versatility because it allows you to gain some life, it lets you fix your mana color, and then it also could let you draw discard to kind of throw away the cards you don't need, kind of dig for answers, stuff like that. We have these slow lands, Dreamroot, Cascade in that series where it comes into play untapped on turn 3, or when you have 3 or more lands, so a lot of utility there. Chromatic Lantern's probably the next best, or arguably the best 3 mana rock, fixing all your mana base colors, so especially good in multicolor decks, 5 color decks to kind of fix the mana in terms of that. Forsaken Crossroads is whatever color land you want and has some utility with scrying. Solemn. So in 1v1, 1v1 generally is a little bit faster than you would in like a 4-player pod of EDH. So Solemn can have a lot of utility still, helps you in terms of ramp shells, gives you card advantage as a blocker against more of the aggressive decks. I would say it's probably not as much of a staple as in like EDH, where the games tend to be a little bit slower. You're also going to run into a little bit more counter spells, a little bit more targeted removal, just because it's 1v1 as opposed to just board wipes. Then we have like the channel lands, the slow lands, counter spells, the next Mystical Archive card, best counter spell in the game arguably. We don't force a will, stuff like that. So just 2 mana, counter anything. All the Gandalf players, all the control players going to have this in their decks. We then have the creature land cycle, another very good cycle to include. Again, just getting utility out of your mana base. Hall of the Storm Giants, we see it got a close to 58% win rate when it is played out in the games. The utility lands, the castles, another very good cycle to look at. So Castle Lochwain, it's going to give you card draw. The green one's going to give you ramp. Red one's a pump to your team if you're going wide. White one will give you tokens. Blue one will let you scry. River's Rebuke is a card that's often played in mono blue shells, blue-white. It's just a big reset, especially in 1v1. Your opponent's building up their board, doing all this stuff. Well, you hit 6 mana and you just say, how about you start again? And then you just kind of progress your board state. And again, because it's in EDH, this is not going to be as good because this is target player. But in 1v1, you're just kind of, your one opponent is just kind of getting set back. And this is really exemplary with the win rate percentage, 63%, in terms of it actually being played. Midnight Clock is a really good ramp card that also lets you sink mana into it and refill your hand. So if you're doing a lot of 1-for-1 answers, or you're kind of just running out of fuel, it's a good way to kind of reset your hand later in the game. Another good land cycle is the Pathways. Again, dual lands, very, very good. Especially, and the nice thing about Brawl is you only need 1 copy. It's not like Constructed where you need 4 of a lot of these. So it is something that if you are looking to kind of build out or enjoy playing certain color pairs, investing in dual lands has a lot of utility. You want to cast all your cool spells, but if you don't have the mana to do so. So we're just going through and it's kind of shown just all the lands themselves, and they all have really high win rate percentage of being played because it helps fix your mana. The next spell we see is Esper Sentinel. So this 1-drop, typically 1-drops are not as impactful in like EDH, depending on your build. But Esper Sentinel does a lot, especially in a 1v1 format. Just being a tax effect, card draw, it's got a lot of synergies. Being an artifact, for playing artifacts theme shells, if you're playing human shells, anything like that. So a lot of utility in that respect. Again, we're just seeing some of the dual lands. Farewell, probably the best sweeper, like Supreme Verdict's in there, but Farewell's got so much utility. It's a heartbreaking card to play against when you are the one having your board selectively picked across. Kind of going from there. And then like Thoughtseize, not as good in 4-player pods. But is very good in 1v1, picking out their best thing, kind of screwing up their curve. You have Growth Spiral that ramps you ahead and draws you a card, replaces itself. Lightning Bolt, really good 1-mana removal spell in 1v1. We have stuff like Elspeth Conquers Death, removal, tax, and reanimation. Skyclave Relic, it's fine. I find it usually a little bit slow. I typically am never kicking this. It's probably like one of the latter inclusions I would put in the format. I'd play a lot more of the 2-mana rocks before I play this. Memory Lapse, Tail's End, just very efficient counter spells. Your opponent's always going to have a legendary in terms of their commander. There's so many activated abilities, whether it be planeswalkers, anything like that, triggered abilities, so you can screw up a lot of things along the way. And then we're just kind of going through Dark Rituals, very good in black-based decks or Black X decks, just kind of getting you ahead. Turn 2 Sheoldred, just kind of ramping you up in terms of burst. I was playing 4-mana Sorin Planeswalker, turn 2 Sorin. Just start drawing cards, making vampires, stuff like that is really good. And then you have stuff like Mazemind's Tome, just general card advantage. Ugin, these fit into any decks, card advantage, removal, kind of mixed in. The adventure creatures often are pretty good too. Murderous Rider, Bonecrusher Giant, stuff like that. Less likely on like Lovestruck Beast in that regard. And then the Triomes are another good land cycle. If you support 3 color decks, cycling, everything like that. Plaza Heroes is interesting depending on the quantity of legendaries. It is a tricolor land at times, but it depends on the density of legendaries that you're going to have in your deck. And then stuff like Brainstorm for the blue-based decks, Lotus Cobra for ramp decks, Fable the Mirror Breaker, just a lot of utility in best of one or like singleton decks, helps you kind of churn through your deck. And then there's so many good enter the battlefield style effects in 100 card singleton, so copying it is really good. I play this in like my EDH deck as well. And then Oracle for like ramp decks, World Tree for mana fixing, Fateful Absence. So you're just gonna get some of the removal options and kind of combing down the list. But just curious to see what's got the best win rates. If we look at it, Emergent Ultimatum. So that kind of makes sense because Emergent Ultimatum is the card that if you cast, you pretty much always get either 2 extra turn spells or some sort of combo that leaves your opponent so far behind. So if you're resolving this, you're generally winning. Scholar of the Lost Troves is often used in either combo shells, part of Emergent Ultimatum, or like Mizzix Mastery shells, or just a whole lot of value kind of mixed into there. Karn's Temporal Sundering, bounce plus an extra turn. Really interested to see Soul Ripper in here in Squad Commander, but they're like, if we look at the volume of games, is pretty low. Mastermind, just kind of tutoring stuff. Teferi being annoying, stuff of that nature. But kind of seeing from there. So let me know what you think of these kind of videos. I'm going to do it at least once for each rarity, but I am looking to do a little bit more evergreen content on the channel. So if there's topics, ideas, stuff like that you'd like to see in addition to the weekly meta breakdowns, let me know in the comments and we'll catch you from there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.